my topic of presentation is provincial disparities in child undernutrition in Nepal. If you see this term disparities, then it appears to represent a concept which can be, intuitively understood. But in Nepal, and I'm sure in most of the developing country, it has got political connotations. And if we look at, again, the core dimensions of the definitions of disparities, then most of the literatures that has, defined these disparities, they have looked at from the perspective from, socioeconomic, gender, ethnic disparities mostly. And we might argue about this concept in Nepal, but in my understanding, this concept has been established at the national discourse during this Maoist insurgencies and during the constitutional drafting process, and this took a national discourse. So, as we all know, the new constitution of Nepal has divided this country into 7 provinces. And it is important now, since the authority for planning and implementation of most of the development programs has been given to provincial level. It is imperative to understand the disparities between these provinces and how these disparities in terms of nutrition, whether it exists or not. If we look at the figure in terms of child malnutrition in the form of stunting, then we can see the difference and the range of disparity between 7 provinces. We can look at the figure in province 4, which is like 28, all the way to province 6, which is like more than 50%. And even the same, in these provinces, if we look at this data from recently published multi-dimensional poverty, we can see also the disparities among these provinces, ranging from 12 in province 3 to again 51% in province 6. So we can say that, there are certain determinants for an outcome. But do the same determinants also are determinants for the disparity? It's the question that I'm trying to, answer from my analysis. And this is again the same, the multidimensional poverty, where you can see the contributing factors for poverty in these provinces, and we can see even nutrition represents a large chunk of contributing factors for multidimensional poverty. So in my paper, which is again preliminary because we are still trying to analyze in more detail, but I'm trying to examine the socio-demographic and socio-economic variables which contributes for provincial disparities in child nutrition. So my outcome of interest was height for age distributions, not the stunting, and the covariates were ranging from age, gender, and all the way to the ODF, ethnicity, and hand washing, and all those covariates. So I used this ordinary least square regression modeling just to see whether the mean of height for age varies with the covariates or not. And then I applied this Binder-Oaxaca decomposition to decompose the gaps between provinces to understand what are the factors which are playing the role in terms of contributing towards disparities. So I took 2 provinces because one province is better off, which is province 4 in terms of stunting, and one is province 6, which is worse off. And then I tried to use these equations where you can see the equation is explained by endowment coefficient and then the interaction between this coefficient and endowment. So This gap, which is partly due to the difference, due to the magnitude of determinants, which is also called like covariates, and also the differences due to the effects of those determinants, because these are two different component which explains the gaps in those two groups. So these equations explain the gap between two groups. So I took like one province 6 as one reference and province 4. So coming into result, we can see from the this ordinary least square regressions. We can see from here, like there are different, factors playing the role for disparities in different provinces, ranging from age of child, which plays the role at national and provincial level, like age of woman, wealth index, then BMI of women, ethnicity, then hand washing, ODF, and treatment of water. So all these factors are playing role at different levels. Some play a role at national level, some play a role at provincial level. So I try to decompose these factors, how these are contributing in terms of disparities between provinces. So you can see here, when I took province 4 as the reference, you can see the disparities or the gap. So you can see this difference, which is, you can see, let's take an example of province 6. And you can see in the bar diagram that the disparities as compared to province 4 is like, the highest. As compared to the gap or the disparities between province 1 and 4. And in this table, the difference is mostly like explained by the endowment factor. And when we say endowment, then it means like we can say this in terms of like, let's say if we take this province 2, which is like 0.635, and it is significant, then we can interpret this finding as like, how would like health for age score would vary if we have the endowment factor or the predictor levels of province 4 in that model. So we can see there are like different this endowment determinants, which is explaining most of the gaps in these 4 provinces, if we take province 4 as the reference. But if we take province 6, then this is explained mostly by the effect of that determinants, which is called coefficient effect. And here you can see most of these differences are explained by coefficient factors in this model. So looking at all these, since this is a preliminary again like findings, what we can interpret from this finding is that majority of the covariates in that model, let's say if this is if we again try to go into details of that modeling and which covariate is explaining most of the, that gaps between province 6 with other provinces, then we can see there are like, caste, ethnicity, then hand washing problem, and then open defecations factors are explaining most of the, these gaps between provinces as compared to province 6. And there are factors related to wealth index as well. So looking at all these, initial finding, what I can interpret from this analysis is the determinants varies. And it's not only, nutrition specific or the immediate factors that are playing the role, but there are other factors which are contributing into the inequalities between provinces. So we need to have a tailored approach, not the blanket approach which will, work in all provinces. And When we target with the package of interventions, let's say like Lancet has recommended like 10 or 13 recommendations for, recommended interventions for nutrition, specific interventions. So even if we take all the nutrition interventions, specific interventions in all these provinces, that would only reduce the stunting by 20%. So we need to also understand the fact that each province has their own realities, and based on that, we need to, target our determinants according to the evidence, rather than taking whole package into all the provinces. So that's the key message that I want to just highlight from this analysis at this stage. Otherwise, you would have to wait for the detailed finding and interpretation and conclusion of this finding. Thank you.